What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Bootleg Football Podcast, AFC South Draft Recap Edition. The one time a year, well, not the one time, one of a few times a year that I get to express all of my pain and suffering as a lifelong Texans fan. Buckle up for this one, guys. We're going to be bearing some souls on today's show. But I do want to welcome in my wonderful co-host, EJ Snyder, who's going to be kind of holding my hand through this torturous offseason of mine here. EJ, before we kind of get digging into all the AFC South goodness, or in my case, badness, first, tell me how you're doing and what are you drinking?
I'm doing okay. Things going on in the world are not fantastic. We acknowledge that and certainly thinking about all that, but we get to talk about football. Hopefully it's a break for some folks. I had field day today. My kids' school, which of course is not in session, big deal at their school, is field day every year. It's kind of like the, three-legged race, Olympic type stuff. And so they sent everybody activity sheets for home, and you got to record some of them, and you get to send them all kind of to the guy that coordinates it, and then they'll post them online. So it's kind of like a virtual field day. So I got to do some beanbag toss today. I got to do some egg race on a spoon. And now I get to sit around and talk about football and drink whiskey. So I have some Pendleton Midnight tonight from Hood River Distilling. If you're familiar with the regular Pendleton, it's a bit of a darker, sort of a little bit more caramely, smoky version of that. I like it. I think it's an upgrade, and I actually like basic Pendleton, so that's saying something. But get to talk about the AFC South, which I know for you is difficult, but we've already gone through my pain in the NFC North, so now we can transition to your pain in the AFC South. But there's a lot to talk about in this division in terms of who people got, how they fit with the system, what teams are trying to do to build. But what are you going to drink? Because I can't wait for this answer since we're talking about the Texans today.
Yeah, I wanted to have no memory of this podcast by the time I'm done recording it, so I'm just doing Cazadores Blanco straight.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I'm hitting it with tequila tonight, boys, because all right, it's bad enough that Houston itself has had a pretty rough offseason. I think we can all agree with that. But seeing the drafts that some of the other AFC South teams have put together, that's enough to put me over the edge. It was rough, especially the Colts, the hated Indianapolis Colts for myself. I like the Colts coaching staff. I like their players. I like their front office. As players and people, I enjoy them very much. But God, do I hate the Colts so much. And they freaking murdered this draft. And every single pick that was rolling in, I was just like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, of course. I'm going to have to deal with that for the next 10 years. Cool. Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor. Yeah, all right, that would happen to me. Cool. So it was a rough draft weekend for me, specifically as a Texans fan. But why don't we lead off with the Colts, just because I think they had a really, really good class, specifically at the top. I'll just kind of roll through pick by pick, and then we'll kind of hit them one by one. Round two, they had a pair of round two picks at the top of the second round. Absolutely killed it, going Michael Pittman and Jonathan Taylor back to back. That's not even including spending their first round pick on DeForest Buckner, if we include him in the draft, which I think we should.
Kind of have to.
So, a top trio of DeForest Buckner, one of the best interior defensive linemen in the whole league, well worth the $20+ million contract they signed him to. Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor as a top three. Good Lord. And then you come back in round three, Justin Blackmon. Round four, Jacob Eason to be their developmental quarterback behind Phillip and Jacoby. Round five, Danny Pinner. Round six, Robert Windsor, defensive tackle for Penn State. Actually, they had 4 6-round picks. So then after Windsor, they had a pick from the Jets and then 2 picks from the Patriots that they got via trade. They took Isaiah Rodgers, the corner from UMass, Desmond Patman, the wide receiver from Wazoo, and then Jordan Glasgow, the youngest Glasgow brother of 3 in the NFL, the safety from Michigan, who was a linebacker. They have him listed as a safety. I guess he'll be kind of like a hybrid player. But, hell of a class by them, particularly at the top. I feel like they were more top-heavy. But even if their first 3 picks, if that's all they get out of it is Buckner, Pittman, and Taylor, That by itself, I think, is a hell of a haul for them.
Yeah, Pittman is a huge upgrade for this team. The wide receiver core was just crying out for an upgrade. Quick trivia question. Name the leading receiver in terms of yards for the Colts last year. And hint, it's not T.Y. Hilton because he was injured. Played through a bunch of injury, missed a couple of games. Well, more than a couple of games. Yeah, I would bet most listeners, sans Colts fans, could not name the Colts leading receiver last year. Bonus points if you know how many yards he had. It was Zach Pascal, and he had 607. That was their leading receiver on the team, and T.Y. Hilton had 501. So between the two of them, 1,108 yards. That's a decent year for one wide receiver. So Michael Pittman waltzes into a situation. We sang Pittman's praises. I believe he was on our Offensive 10 Gems podcast before the draft. We saw him at the Senior Bowl. He's got great size, really good hands, destroyed people at the Senior Bowl with routes, was very physical. If you want to see an absolute Superman film, watch him against Utah.
Oh, God, yeah. He killed
Wrecked them, showed you the potential. So if you're looking for his sort of best film, that's it. But he pretty much waltzes into a starting position with the Colts. There's nobody on the Colts roster, including Zach Pascal, that can hold a candle to Pittman. So he's pretty much penciled for one of their two starting wide receivers. If Hilton's healthy, obviously, he's probably the number one.
Didn't Utah have 3 guys drafted from their secondary in the first 3 rounds?
Yeah, and the
if
fourth,
I remember correctly.
Yeah, and the fourth is also in the league as well. So that Utah secondary was very capable and desired certainly by the NFL. But Pittman ripped them with, I would call it, average quarterbacking. It was not great quarterbacking, but he had a fantastic game. And then you had Jonathan Taylor to that. Look out! Like, Taylor is a superhero. He's very, very good size. We saw him run at the combine, and anybody who had not watched his games when he was in college said, wow, he's really fast. He's a sprint champion. Yeah. Like, he's a huge dude. He reminds me a little bit of Herschel, not in his running style, not in how physical he is or anything else, but he is a big guy who is well built, who is fast. And I mean fast. And he's got pretty good vision. He rounds out the room. We talk about building a stable of running backs, and Taylor gives Indy another very good back. I was a huge Marlon Mack fan pre-draft. He went to the Colts. He's had a couple of good years. Naheem Hines is a great change of pace guy, really fast. We used to call him third down backs, but a lot of times now they're first down backs, pass catcher, scat back. And then Bruce Anderson was a guy out of North Dakota State who I really liked as a sort of late round developmental guy. And they've already got those 3 guys in the running back room. You had Jonathan Taylor, who's like a superstar. Your offense looks a lot different with Pittman and Taylor in it.
You know, it's kind of funny because Jonathan Taylor wore 23 because his favorite running back ever was the great Arian Foster, one of my favorite players and human beings, period. And you can kind of see, like, in terms of his stride, it's a very glidey, open gait. Like, it's a track star kind of stride where it's just very smooth and fluid. And that's part of the reason why I think people didn't think he was as fast as he was, because he looks like he's just gliding down the field like Arian did. And my comp to him sometime around November, I think I tweeted it out, was he's Arian Foster with rockets strapped to his feet. And if you're getting even 90% of Arian Foster out of Jonathan Taylor, that is a pick well spent. I think he could, if he doesn't displace Marlon Mack this year, I think at least he's going to get a 50-50 split and probably, I think, be more efficient with those touches than Mack too, on way to probably taking over the full, lion's share of carries in 2021. I think they have a franchise, starting Pro Bowl, potentially all pro, if things break his way, caliber of running back they're getting here at 41 overall. And you have 5 years of contract control on him when he's going to be dirt cheap. So I think you really just ride him as much as you possibly can over the next 5 years, because I think he's going to be really, really damn good. And again, Pittman and him growing up together in this offense, we'll see what they do at quarterback after Phil retires, but man, that's a hell of a duo to start out with.
Yeah, he's got a great line in front of him too. I mean, he's probably got the best guard in football. in Quentin, and he's got a great center in Ryan, and he's got a lot of guys, and he's got a coach who understands how the running game and the passing game work. And you've just got weapons now where you can go, if you audible out a pass and go to run, you're not handicapping yourself, and vice versa. If you go back to the pass, you've got enough weapons now. I still think it's a little bit maybe run heavier in terms of favor of talent, but you can pretty much put up points with whatever you call. And that's a lot of offensive balance to pull in the first, basically 2 rounds, really all in the second round for the Colts.
I know we kind of mentioned him a little bit before, but in a vacuum, what did you think of the Julian Blackmon pick? And I do want to apologize for accidentally saying Justin before. I meant Julian Blackmon. Talking about the AFC South, I do have Justin Blackmon on my mind, I guess, who's technically, I think, still on the Jaguars roster, believe it or not. But anyway, back to Julian Blackmon. I think he was probably, at least for me, more of a 4th-round guy than a 3rd-round guy. Like, I'm not going to quibble too much about him going late in the 3rd, or actually not, probably about mid-3rd. Like, it's not the worst thing in the world to me. It might have been a hair early, but what did you specifically think of that value? Would you have taken him in the 3rd, or would you personally have waited a little bit longer?
It really depends on what the Colts coaches saw. And if they watched his 2018 tape, which I'm sure they did, versus his 2019 tape, it was a steal. They were probably sitting on their hands going, pick him, pick him, pick him, pick him, because his 2018 tape was really, really good. He slacked off a little bit in 19. He still wasn't bad. He got outshone a little bit by his teammates, but his 2018 tape showed what he's capable of. And if they believe they could get that level of play out of him, 3rd round is a value. If you believe 2019 is kind of his true value or setting point in a league, maybe it was, like you said, half round early, but I'm never going to say, it was a half round early, because teams' valuations are so different than ours. But I think his path to playing time in Indianapolis is really good. I think he could start the first game in the strong safety spot. Again, we're going to talk about the modified offseason or the invisible offseason, if that's going to be the case. But Kari Willis is the only guy in his way. I think Blackmon, if he plays anywhere near his 2018 level, is easily that talented, possibly more. And if Hooker can stay healthy and can stay on the Colts, they could form a really good duo. And I think that would set them up pretty well in the secondary in a division that, let's face it, is pass heavy. That's not a bad start. So I thought it was a solid pick. They obviously believe that he can reach those 2018 heights, picking him that high, but not a bad value either. So
I kind of felt like, so even though he is, a 4-4 kind of guy on the watch, I didn't feel like he played that fast. But if the Colts kind of insist on, really finding safeties that are comfortable in 2 high shells, there's been talk that they feel like Malik is really more of a fit as like a pure center fielder for a team that wants to play cover 1 and cover 3 all day, whereas they want maybe somebody who's a little bit more versatile that can play in 2 high and come down and, play the run from deep while also bracketing deep and just kind of being a little bit more versatile in that way. Even though I think Hooker is a tremendous center fielder. Again, he's not the most versatile safety in the world. So I think from that standpoint, maybe he fits a little bit better than Malik because he doesn't have the highs of Hooker, but I think he's a little bit more even keel than Hooker in terms of versatility. So I can see it from that standpoint of trying to find a safety that fits in that way. Again, I think they could have gotten him around later, but I guess they just disagreed. What they did do was around later in the 4th, they did pick up Jacob Eason, who I think was also another, dare I say, riskier pick on their part. Because, the highs and the lows of Eason are very far apart. Highly inconsistent quarterback. He's not going to start this year. I hope he doesn't start this year. And he probably won't even start next year either. I think this is really kind of a draft pick of like, hey, we'll see where he's at in 2022. And if he doesn't work out, who cares? It's a day 2 pick or day 3 pick. But I do think this was definitely a huge risk for them. I'm not quite sure if I'm in love with it. Like, I can see why they did it, but man, I think 4th was maybe a little bit rich for me for Eason.
I think it was in terms of Eason's pure value, but if they are looking at the highs and thinking they can coach it out of him, and come on, the head coach is a former quarterback. Almost everybody in the NFL thinks they can fix guys like this.
Yeah.
Eason is a local for me. He played right up the road at UW. His highs are extremely high. I have seen him throw footballs literally as hard as I've ever seen anyone throw a football in my life, and that includes the Brett Favres of the world. That includes the Mike Vicks of the world. Eason can throw it on a line, never reaching more than probably about 15, 18 feet off the ground, 40 yards, and
What
hit
was
a guy
that
in the
game
chest.
where he was rolling to his left and hit that touchdown in the back left
Oh,
corner?
the one I sent you, the one, yeah, where he hit the guy in the back left corner, and I was like, when he lets the ball go, you're like, what is he doing? There's no way, and it just warps into the receiver's hands, and you're like, holy crap, like, I didn't think that was possible. Like, I didn't think you could do that with a football, right? But Eason does that, and that's the lure of Eason, right? Is that occasionally, well, not occasionally, I would say about 30 or 40% of the time, he uncorks those things and you go, holy crap. And he didn't get a whole lot of help from the UW receiving core. They had quite a few drops. They weren't a terribly talented unit this year. I think people can look at Eason and say he's got great size. He's got okay pocket mobility. He's not a really take off and run guy. He's a good athlete. But really, you're drafting Eason for the arm and saying, hey, I think I can make the decisions a little bit better. I think I can make the vision a little bit better. And honestly, I think he lands in one of the 3 or 4 best spots that he could have in the NFL. Is it around early? I think it is. But regardless, Frank's going to do a very solid job getting him tuned up, rounding off some of the rough edges. How high he can go, we'll see. That's really up to Eason. But he has a cannon and very good size. He's 6'4", 6'5". If he can vary his touch just a little bit, that would be a huge win for 2020. Right? If he can learn to take a little bit off, because even some balls over the middle, guy's 8 yards away, and he's just like, bam! Easy, Eason. Just ease off on the throttle a little bit. If he can do that for 2020 and get to his second read consistently and not just sort of twitch to it and throw into double coverage, which UW fans will attest that happens at least a couple of times a game. We'll see if he's a good value down the road. Even if he's just an average backup, even if he's a traditional sort of clipboard holder that comes in for 2 or 3 games a year and throws some bombs to Michael Pittman, that's probably good enough for, like you said, a day 3 pick.
He's an easy guy to sell to a coach that's a former quarterback, because all you have to do, you literally only have to show him that one play. The touchdown in the back left pylon that I can't remember who was against. I think it was Oregon. And it was literally the best throw I saw any quarterback make in college ever. Or not ever, but of that whole season. That was the best quarterback that any college quarterback made in all of 2019. I'm including Joe Burrow, Tua, all of them. That was the best throw. It was
he's got a better
insane.
arm than Burrow or Tua, by far.
He's got a better arm than Herbert even, and Herbert's
I think Herbert has a more consistent arm and can vary his touch and delivery angle a little bit, but if you want to talk about pure throw it through the wall, Eason blows those guys out of the water. Eason has a howitzer attached. It's
him and Josh Allen are the only two
he's got a gun. And that's the thing, is if you believe that you can focus in the targeting mechanism on Eason, you got a guy that's near unstoppable, because you can't cover tight enough. You could be, half a yard off, 30 yards downfield. And if he lets it go and gets it in the window, he can get it in the window. I mean, that's the lure of Eason.
Yeah, there's worse ways to spend a 4th rounder. What did you think of Danny Pinner from Ball State, who they spent a 5th rounder on?
Okay, I'm going to hurt one of my colleagues at Windy City Gridiron a lot here, very deeply, and say I did not watch Danny Pinner.
How dare you?
I know. How dare me? No, I didn't watch Danny Pinner, so I don't have an opinion. I will always tell you guys and gals when I do not watch somebody. I have zero opinion on Danny Pinner. I did not go back and watch him either. I did go back and watch a couple of the lower round corners and wide receivers. I know, again, how dare I? My former offensive line colleagues at Windy City Gridiron are throwing virtual tomatoes at me right now, but that's all right.
It's okay. I didn't watch him either. It's Ball State.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. Danny, we love you. We hope you turn into a good one. Look, you can hang out behind Quentin Nelson and probably learn more than we could ever teach you, so go to it. That's fine. But Windsor, a lot of people late in the process said, hey, this Robert Windsor guy, I think there might be something there. A lot of my draft colleagues got excited about him. So I went and watched him fairly late in the process, and I didn't see it. He was one of those guys that I went through the tape and I thought, yeah, he makes the occasional play, but if you go through tape, not highlights, of which there weren't a ton, but if you go through tape, not highlights, he takes up a bunch of space, but he really struck me as sort of that true to the Colts type of rotational guys on the D-line. Big framed, powerful, not tremendously athletic in terms of very flexible, very agile, great change of direction. This is a guy that's going to stand in there, use his frame, use his power, and kind of, I hate to say it, but take up space, right? He's gonna get a gap and a half just because he's a big dude that's hard to move. He does have the occasional highlight. They are few and far between. If the Colts can coax more out of him, they got something there. But he was a guy that I wanted to get excited about as kind of that late round defensive line steal. After I watched him, I was like, I don't think that's happening. I hope he proves me wrong.
Yeah, I watched him in the Minnesota game, and I thought he actually played pretty well. Some people were... I don't want to say some people. There were a few people on my timeline that says, "Why would you take Raekwon Davis when you could take Windsor?" And it's not the same thing.
Yeah,
trust me,
that's not the same player.
It's not the same thing. There's a reason he went in the 5th. I feel like he doesn't get off blocks as well as he should for a guy with his frame.
Nope.
You're really drafting him for frame and potential. I think he's, weirdly enough, like a better one-gap player than a two-gap player right now, which is curious because I kind of felt like Indy would be prioritizing more two-gappers to play inside. So I am curious to see how they're going to use him, but he's not Raekwon Davis. Like let's just get that out of the way right now.
Yeah.
I think he's okay. And again, for a 5th-round pick, if he doesn't work out, who cares? I think you're really just taking him for upside because of the first step and because of his frame. And you think that maybe he can kind of be a diamond in the rough if you have a good coaching staff that can mold him. But I wasn't quite on the whole like Robert Windsor late day 2, early day 3 train that some people are on. I didn't quite see that. Now, I did not watch Isaiah Rodgers, the corner from UMass. Again, I can only watch so many players. I couldn't get around to Ball State. I couldn't get around to UMass. Did you happen to catch him at all?
I did not catch him pre-draft, but for this very podcast, I went back. I had about 4 or 5 guys in the AFC South that I did not watch that I wanted to. Rodgers was one of those guys. He's undersized, but he's got really good instincts and short area burst. I think he'll probably be a backup nickel to start. He's got a real shot on special teams because he was a very good returner at UMass. And I think he can kind of sit behind T.Y. Hilton, and T.Y. Hilton's a receiver, and he's a defensive back. I know, but T.Y. Hilton has some return skills, and they're going to get in the special teams room, and T.Y.'s going to look at Rodgers and go, yeah, you got some of that, man. Good vision in the return game and a nose for the end zone. There's a couple of returns from his UMass tape where he just kind of wills it to happen. He ends up, turning a couple of guys around with jukes and jab steps and just, jumps over another guy. He's not a guy to give up on the return game. He also is a really good hitter in special teams, like as a gunner. There's a play against Army where he goes down, and you'll see it in any of his highlights. He goes down and just whacks the returner, takes him off his feet. So he's hard-nosed both ways in the return game, and he's got good speed in the fact that when he opens it up, he doesn't have a lot of burst to get there. It's not the acceleration, but when he opens it up, he starts to outrun people. So he's got good long speed, but not necessarily great short speed, if that makes sense. But the fact that he's valuable on special teams and can back somebody up in sort of the nickel package makes him valuable enough that that's what you're looking for when you're picking guys down in the draft, is a little bit of versatility. So I think he's got a decent chance to stick on the roster because he can do 2 or 3 things.
Yeah, I mean, anybody with special teams versatility, again, it's a day 3 pick, so that's kind of what you're hoping for. I kind of had the same feelings with Desmond Patman. Again, huge, like 6'4", 220, 225, somewhere around in that range. Like, even if he doesn't develop well as a wide receiver, just getting someone with that kind of size and speed on your coverage teams, your punt block teams, like anybody with length and explosiveness that a special teams coordinator can use, that's a valuable thing. So again, day 3 picks, you're looking for athletes a lot of the times that you can just throw on the field in your coverage teams. I'm
super excited about Patman, though. I stand for Patman pretty hard before the draft. He is a somewhat local guy at Wazoo. But he's huge, like you said, 6'4", 225. He put up 762 yards, 8 touchdowns. He's one of the main targets at Wazoo. Over 13 yards a catch in a pretty varied attack. Spread, Mike Leach attack. I think in any other year, that's kind of a guaranteed 3rd, 4th round pick, right? They look at the size, they look at the production and go, yeah. But this year, we talked about it, loaded wide receiver draft, 6th, right? And we also talked about the Colts wide receiver room. Like, there's nobody with those skills sitting there besides Pittman, who they just drafted. I think Patman's got a really good chance to be the sort of, I don't want to say 4th necessarily, because Chaz Pasquale earned it last year, but I'd say 5th wide receiver. Like, if you're bringing out 4 wides and you want to go big towards the red zone, Patman can do that, like, right now. And there's nobody standing in his way on the Indy wide receiver roster to do that. So I was really excited to see he ended up here. Great path to playing time. And I think he's just a lot better than a lot of people think. Louis Riddick backed me up on this one and actually, put something out very similar about a month after I did that said, hey, I don't think this guy's getting enough love. If you're looking at Anthony Gordon highlights, like, this is the guy that's catching a lot of those balls, and he's right.
Yeah, I mean, he's 6'4", 225 and runs 4.48, which by itself is just really, really damn hard to find. I think specifically, maybe he's not super developed as a route runner, especially when compared to Pittman and obviously compared to T.Y., who's one of the better route runners in the league. But that kind of size and speed, when you get him going, like, even if you just get him involved on, like, mesh plays where you're setting a pick for him on mesh and you say, okay, just go run. Like, he can do that. Like you mentioned, again, he has the size and frame and explosiveness to be an effective red zone weapon. Do I expect him to go out there and start roasting man coverage with route running? No, but I think if you scheme, at least early in his career, if you scheme that kind of athlete open, he can almost play kind of like a weird Eric Ebron type role for them, where Eric Ebron was like,
you could run him out of the slot on little crosses, throw to the boundary.
That's what they did
have
for
him
Ebron.
Go up, have him go up 1-on-1, win those balls. Like, he has those skills, so he's not gonna. You're right. He's not just gonna win 1-on-1 coverage with route running. But if you throw a back shoulder to a guy that's 6'4", 225 and knows how to go up and get it, like, he's gonna have production.
Yeah, we just need Phil to actually get it to him because Phil struggled with doing that last year.
Yeah, there's that. Don't throw cold water on it quite yet. Colts fans should get excited about Des Patman.
Yeah, I again, he'll probably make the roster just because of the state the receiving corps is in.
I'd be really stunned if he doesn't. Like, I really think he's a lot better player than his draft slot pick.
Now, I watched a lot of Michigan defense, but I did not pay a whole lot of attention to Jordan Glasgow. I think I watched one game of his, which was Ohio State, which honestly, who on defense ever looks good against Ohio State? So I didn't really feel compelled to watch more beyond that. Did you happen to examine him more than just the one game? Like, I felt like, again, they're listing him at safety, even though he kind of played like a hybrid kind of linebacker. He played some DB, he played some linebacker for them. I don't really see him playing deep at all. Like, if anything, I would really kind of make him a full-time linebacker and keep him within 10 yards of the line of scrimmage. I don't necessarily think he had the movement skills to play safety full-time in the NFL, regardless of what he's listed at. I I think he's going to be a linebacker the next level, a lighter linebacker, but a linebacker nonetheless. Do you kind of have the same feelings of him?
No, I don't
You
have
think
any
he's a
feelings.
safety?
No, I don't have any feelings.
Oh,
We're gonna hit a theme in this podcast. We're gonna do it once with Indy. We're gonna do it again with Tennessee, and these late round safeties. I got nothing. I got nothing on the one for Tennessee either.
wait, which one for Tennessee?
Chris Jackson from Marshall.
Yeah,
I got
didn't
nothing.
watch him either. Yeah. This is so most of these division by division podcasts. We've been able to hit most of these guys, but the AFC South drafted a lot of small school guys or just late round guys that we just never got to.
Nope.
Weirdly
Didn't
enough.
look. Didn't look.
There's a high concentration of them in these South teams. But overall, again, I didn't watch Pinner. I didn't watch Rodgers. I only watched one game in Glasgow. But again, it's Ohio State, so take that with a grain of salt. But he didn't wow me against Ohio State. I just didn't really see the movement skills there that I think can play full-time safety. I do think he'll be a linebacker special team type. But even just at the top of the draft with the guys that I did watch, DeForest Buckner's a favorite of mine. Pittman, I love. Taylor, I love. Blackman, I think, can work. Eason, if he works, great. If he doesn't work, who cares as a fourth rounder? Just take those first 5 guys, and I think that's a very successful draft, regardless of if they miss on everybody else after that. Like Patman, if he works out, would just be a cherry on top. But even if he doesn't, if they only hit on those first 3 to 5 guys, they're okay.
Yeah, they did fine. They added a lot of talent. Again, you gave your offense a tremendous boost with Pittman and Taylor. You gave your defense a really good boost with your first rounder that goes for the interior defensive tackle, who is, an all-pro. Just that. Those 3 picks, if Blackman works out to be their versatile safety, whether or not Hooker stays in town, and then guys like Rodgers or Patman, or maybe it's Windsor or Glasgow. I mean, we could be wrong about those guys too. If any of those last 4 or 5 guys work out, and if Eason works out to be even a capable backup, great pick for a 4th rounder.
Yeah. Now let's move on to Tennessee here, because again, another one of these draft classes that just made me tear my hair out as a Texans fan. I'll go through the picks one by one again. Isaiah Wilson, round 1. Christian Fulton, one of my favorite corners in this class. I had him as my CB3, if I remember correctly, even ahead of CJ Henderson. I had it was obviously Okudah at 1, and then AJ Terrell at 2, and then Christian Fulton at 3. They got him in round 2 at pick 61, which blew my freaking mind to see him go that late. And then Darrington Evans, in round 3, one of our favorites from App State. Laurel Murchison, he's a little bit of an undersized defensive tackle, maybe not quite the movement skills that you would expect from a guy who's 290. I think he's a little bit stiff and not quite as explosive as you hope for a guy that size, but he does have some skills. So, and again, it's a 5th round pick. Who cares? And then in the 7th round, they had 2 guys, Cole McDonald, who's a favorite of yours, and Chris Jackson, who we already mentioned, safety from Marshall, that neither one of us watched because it's really, really tough to get Marshall all 22, full disclosure. So let's start at the top at Isaiah Wilson. This was kind of a little bit of a controversial pick. In terms of some people thinking that he wasn't worthy of a 1st round selection. But I think when you look at his fit with Tennessee, just a big, hulking offensive tackle that can crush you in the run game. And again, they run so much play action that he's not really going to be exposed as much in pure pass protection where, it's a 7-step drop or a 5-step drop. And they're saying, okay, go hold up for 3 seconds against this guy who's teeing off on you with a speed rush. He's not really going to be asked to do that. So I don't think his main weakness is going to be exposed as much. I think for their system, he is worth a 1st round pick. And again, it crushed my soul when they took him because I knew that he was a perfect fit. What did you personally think of Isaiah Wilson at 29 compared to the early to mid 2nd round grade that a lot of people thought he was going to go?
Well, you talked about a couple things that I like, which is the first one you didn't talk about is the fact that there was a tackle run this year. We knew there was a ton of talent at offensive tackle. best offensive tackle class in a while. He is massive, one of the biggest guys in the class, 6'7", 340. He is young. He's a little raw in pass pro. Right now, he uses his size and his strength more than technique and angles. He's going to have to pick that up. That's the nuance he's going to have to learn. Double moves aren't his kryptonite. He really doesn't like double moves. If he catches you on the first move, you're not going anywhere. If he bites for the first move and you get the second one in on him as a pass rusher, he can look pretty silly.
Yeah,
but right now, he
just beat him up.
Yep, he just dominates with size, speed, strength, attitude. Look, he's a Georgia offensive lineman. They love to block down. And I think that's what Tennessee saw and really said, we can work with that. If that's what we get starting off, that's perfect. That's why Vrabel and Co. probably picked him, loved him. They dig trench fighters, right? You look at their offensive line. They like guys that fight down there. They like guys that punch. They like guys that are heavy hitters. They love all that stuff. And right now, he's a brute. Like, Wilson is a brute. He digs it. And tell you what, DeAndre Swift loved cutting inside of him and just blasting upfield because he knew that Wilson was going to be pushing his guy a yard or two outside the lane. So he would run off Wilson's sort of right hip and then do that 1 foot jab step that Swift loves to do and just jet upfield right behind Wilson's backside because he knew he was going to clear his guy. And he got a lot of yards off that play because he just knew that there was going to be space there. And it's because Isaiah Wilson is a beast. I imagine the Titans backs are going to love that too, right? They're going to figure that out really quickly that, hey, if you tell that guy just light into your dude and, push him 3 yards and we'll do the rest, he can do that right now. Like, he doesn't need development to do that. And if they get the rest of it, it's sort of icing on the cupcake.
Yeah, one of the best ways to stop outside zone runs, which is what Tennessee does a lot. They run a lot of outside zone because that's what Derrick Henry's good at. But one of the best ways to stop that is you set a really hard edge and you do not let the front side tackle on that play expand the edge and kind of give the running back more space to string it out and make the linebackers flow hard to the front side so they can cut it back. If you set a hard edge and force the cutback early, guess what? The linebackers aren't going to be overflowing. They're going to be sitting right there in the cutback lane. And so I think when you look at his fit, he's so strong and so massive and so long that you can't really set a hard edge against him. If you try to stack up on him, he's just going to fucking push you out of the way. Like, you're going to be moving laterally an extra 4 to 5 yards, which then allows Derrick Henry to string it out even longer and make running backs over pursue so that he can cut it back and get upfield and, use his size and speed and Derrick Henry-ness to get an automatic 5-yard gain basically every time. Or if the linebackers do just kind of sit in that cutback lane, Henry has the size and speed again to, use his trademark stiff arm, get the edge, run for 80 yards and get a touchdown basically anytime he wants to. Like, that's what they like to do because that's what Derrick Henry likes to do. And Isaiah Wilson, just for that one play alone, it's kind of similar to Mekhi Becton. Just for that one play, like, that's worth it. So again, I love that fit for them. And then I mentioned earlier round 2 with Christian Fulton all the way down at 61 late in round 2. I do not have an explanation for why he went this late. Again, he was my 3rd rated corner. He's smart. He's tough. Really good in press, good zone awareness, not like as quick in zone as CJ Henderson, but I think he's very aware. He's got good eyes. You saw him make some really good interceptions where he's kind of playing like a trap technique where, he'll carry the one and then bait the throw to the number 2 and then go and cut it off and pick it off. Like, he's really damn good. Even against Bama's receiving core, Ruggs got him once on a dig route, but other than that, I mean, he held up pretty well. And they were picking more on the other kid who was a true freshman. I can't remember his name, but he was phenomenal. Stingley.
Yep.
Yeah, they were picking more on him with Devontae Smith than they were on Fulton. So that says a lot to me. So he's a really damn good corner. And again, getting him down in late round 2, he went after a lot of guys that I would have taken him over. So I again, one of the better picks any team made in round 2, and he's going to play there for a long time. And then Darrington Evans. I mean, damn. Like if Derrick Henry doesn't get extended to a long-term deal, I think he's just on the franchise tag for this year. You can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe they extended him. I don't think they did. I think it's just franchise tag for this year. But if he's not extended, Evans can step in, like literally from the word go in 2021 and be their new bell cow running back and be phenomenally productive in that system. Again, he's another one-cut zone runner. He won't quite take the load of Derrick Henry. I think you really want to max him out at like 15 to 17 total touches in a game. But again, you miss him once and he is gone. I think he's tough inside the tackles. Really, really underrated player. Perfect scheme fit. And if they lose Henry, it's okay. They got Evans. I think they're perfectly fine.
Yeah, Evans is the speed guy complement to the pound side of the Titans attack, and Derrick Henry is obviously a little bit of both. He's huge, but he's got great speed as well in the straight lines. So Evans is more of a slasher. I like Benjamin's overall game better, but I'm not going to argue the choice because I think Darrington Evans fits with, again, the system we were just describing. He's kind of like DeAndre Swift light. I don't think he's quite as good, but he has that same look to the outside zone, stick that one foot in the ground, and boom, get through the line.
He is a slasher.
That's right. And so, about a round earlier than I probably would have picked him, but dealer's choice, right? He fits your system. They like him. He's local to them. I'm sure they saw a lot of his games in person. They're obviously very comfortable with him. Back to Fulton for a minute. He represents a really good value, like you said. Gives them a really nice triple threat. Malcolm Butler, Adoree Jackson, and Fulton. And the other thing is they needed him. They let Logan Ryan go. And Ryan was crazy last year production-wise. He had 73 solo tackles and 4 of everything else.
He had 4 forced fumbles and picks?
He had 4 INTs. He had 4 forced fumbles. He had 4.5 sacks and 4 TFLs. And just to keep the little integer thing going, he had 8 QB hits, so 4 times 2. So, anyways, Logan Ryan, crazy productive for a defensive back in that system. Like 75 solos, 4 picks, 4 forced fumbles, 4.5 sacks, 4 tackles for loss, and 8 QB hits. Like, that is a very active defensive back. And I know they like Adoree Jackson. And honestly, Christian Fulton reminds me a little bit of Adoree Jackson in his game. The sort of zone awareness, the speed to break. So they're going to count on Butler on one side to be really well-rounded. They're going to say Adoree Jackson and Fulton fill in the other 2 slots and, go play the system. So both really good choices. We talked about Murchison a little bit in the open. He's a bit of an oxymoron. He's a productive sort of 3-tech DE who's really not a great athlete. Like, he's big, but he doesn't have a ton of burst. He's not fast, but he gets it done.
Stiff for me.
Yeah, he is stiff, but he's one of those guys that's stiff but gets it done. It's odd that way. I think he's a rotational guy right off. But again, we're talking about they didn't have a 4th round pick, so now we drop down to the 5th round, pick 174. You get a guy that is tough. He plays strong. He, again, like we said, is not super nimble, but he is effective. He is one of those guys that found production. And those guys are always fascinating to me. We'll see what he does in Tennessee. I don't have super high hopes for him, but I bet he's a rotational guy pretty much right off.
When I turned him on, I was really, like, when I first turned him on, I was really hoping, like, just based on his measurements, I was like, okay, let's see if we can get, like, another McTelvin a game going here. And no, it's not. It's not
no.
It's
no, he doesn't have that kind of game. But he does have game, right? That's the thing, is you look at him and he kind of lulls you to sleep. You think, oh, he's not super flashy. He's not super fast. He's not blowing guys off with power. He's not blowing around them with speed. But he still ends up in the quarterback's face a good amount. And look, North Carolina State's defensive line was not tremendously talented. They were certainly talented, but he's one of those guys that gets it done. So interesting dude. And if we want to talk about interesting dudes, like Cole McDonald is as interesting as it gets in this draft. If you're not familiar with Cole McDonald, played quarterback at Hawaii. Yes, the Rainbow Warriors. Shout out to the folks on Oahu. Really fascinating two-way athleticism. 6'4", 220, so he's got great size. A little bit of an unconventional release, and I honestly think this is why he drops. Because he throws the ball from different arm slots kind of all the time. He's got a little bit of a drop elbow, 3/4 release, which when you look at it, you kind of go, eh. But then you look at where the ball goes. And A, it gets there in a hurry. And B, it's on target. Like he had the traditional slate of Hawaii receivers, not super big, pretty quick, kind of crafty. And there's like 6 of them and you can't remember which one's which because they all do the same thing. And he hit all of them for a ton of touchdowns. And if you're going to throw to those guys, you got to be fairly accurate. They are not the Colin Johnsons of the world. They're not the Michael Pittman Juniors of the world. They're not 6'4", 6'5", 220. They're not going to climb the ladder for you typically. That's not Hawaii receivers. They run basically a run and shoot. Spread, lots of Smurfs that all do the same thing, and he hit all of them for a ton of touchdowns. He had huge production, 40 TDs in both of the last 2 seasons. That's right, 40 plus in both of the last 2 seasons. So if you are a production guy, if you're an analytics person, McDonald was getting it done. He is a gunslinger for sure. He doesn't mind operating outside the offense when things break down, and that's going to be great for him as a young quarterback in the NFL. Things break down fairly often for those folks, and he can create outside the system. Again, he can run. He's got good speed. He's got good size. He can see over the line, and if you leave somebody open, he will whip it to them. He might do it sidearm, but he will get it there, and it will hit him in the numbers. So he can do the on-schedule thing. He can do the off-schedule thing. He's got the running element. He's a really fascinating guy to come in and kind of give them a different element at quarterback behind Ryan Tannehill, who is sort of resurrected his career there.
Out of all the young backups in the AFC South, I feel like if I was going to be most confident in one of them, it would be Cole McDonald. To actually go out there and win a game for me. I would have more confidence. Weirdly though, he went three rounds later than Eason. If we had to throw them out there for the worst case scenario, Ryan Tannehill gets hurt, I would have more confidence in Cole McDonald getting me a win in 2020 than Eason or the Luton from Oregon State. Is that crazy to say?
No, I don't think it's crazy because he just gives you more options as a young sort of developmental guy without experience. If it breaks down, he can run. He's got mobility. He's got good speed, and he's not afraid to use it. And again, if the on-schedule play is there, even if you're sort of limiting it to half-field reads, and he's going 1-2 and out, he can do that. If the play breaks down and he gets center pressure from a guy like Blacklock, in Houston, he can roll out and play off schedule on the outside on the rollout bootleg. He's got all those abilities, and until he develops into a more sort of familiar with the offense, developed full field, multiple read quarterback, he's got all the things that can help him survive. So I don't think it's nuts. And he's exciting. Go watch some Cole McDonald tape. This is an exciting kid, right? He's got a good arm. He's pretty mellow. He's just a fascinating player to watch. So I don't think it's nuts.
Yeah, 100%. He's a popcorn quarterback for sure. So
yes.
overall, I think Tennessee's class, it was not very big, but I think they got at minimum 2 immediate starters out of it. Potentially a future, I don't want to say a star, but I think in that system, Darrington Evans, if Derrick Henry's no longer in the picture for whatever reason, he could be highly productive for them. Even in a limited role, he could be highly productive. Murchison, again, he's a 5th-round pick. I'm curious to see how they use him. I wasn't super high on his traits, but I am super high on Cole McDonald's traits. So, for a 7th-round pick, again, I would maybe even flip-flop both of them and be totally fine with it. And then again, I mentioned I didn't watch Chris Jackson, but even though it's a small class, I think Tennessee got a bunch of solid players, some immediate starters, some potential lottery tickets that if they hit, they can hit big. So
and it's fit,
and
with them.
Yeah, they all fit.
Isaiah Wilson, Fulton, and Evans, certainly. Those 3 right down the board, 1, 2, 3 for them are system fit. Like they just slot into the sort of, it's square pegs and square holes. And, teams that do that put their players in the best position to succeed.
And I respect teams that both draft for what they do well, and also I respect teams that draft against what people in their division do well, which brings me to Jacksonville.
Bum, bum, bum.
Because I don't think they did that. And I don't think, like, when you're in the AFC South, especially for this year, you kind of have to read the room a little bit. And if you're in a division...
Come on, Doug, read the room!
You're in a division where Houston, Indy, and Tennessee all of them, have a tendency to attack the edges and attack the flats, both in the run game and the pass game. Houston loves to run RPOs where they're giving it to their 6'6" and 6'7" tight ends out in the flat, and they say, okay, corners, go tackle them. Tennessee loves to run outside zone and try to spring it to the edge and say, corners, go tackle them, or crack toss. Indy is going to be doing the exact same thing with Jonathan Taylor. Why the hell, if you're in that division, are you taking the one quarter in this class that doesn't tackle?
Yeah, I'm flashing back to a conversation we had, and this was a conversation I stayed at your house for about 4 days doing pre-draft work, and I think about on the second day we got around to corners. I said, so, as a little bit of a litmus test, what do you think of C.J. Henderson? And, conversation ensued, and, it was probably 5 or 10 minutes in. You looked at me, you said, yeah, because I brought up his lack of tackling, and I thought, man, the one thing I'm going to do is isolate that guy on the edge. And you looked at me and you said, first play, first game of the season, I'm running crack toss at that guy. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about, right? You're gonna make him be the only guy open. You're actually going to tell the wide receiver to pull off him and go block the safety and make sure there's a seal. You're going to say, leave Henderson on the edge for Derrick Henry.
Yep.
And I don't know the schedule, but the first game of the year when he faces somebody that does that, I guarantee the coach on the other sideline is going to line him up and be like, let's just see if he's figured it out. And if he hasn't, he's going to have a very long day.
You want to see a dead body?
Yeah, Mike Vrabel versus C.J. Henderson. God. There's a dead body. Vrabel's gonna rub his nose in it, and if he stands up and bucks up and bows up and stuffs the run on the edge, they might not for the rest of the day. But if he does the little patty cake thing he did in college at Florida, they're gonna run over him like a steamroller all day in creative ways and just grin while doing it.
And even when he did, quote unquote, try to tackle, it was more of like I'm going to throw my body in your general direction. And if you trip over me, that's okay. There was no wrapping involved.
No, this is not a guy that sits on the edge. It's funny, we're going to talk about a guy that the Texans got a little bit later on that I love because he's just an aggressive physical tackler, even though he's quite a bit smaller than C.J. Henderson.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am talking about Reed, so we'll talk about him in a minute. But no, Henderson is the anti-air defender. He is very, very good as a corner. His footwork is good. He understands how to get his hand in the passing lane. His angles and leverage are good. His reads and his hips are pretty good, better than pretty good. If he is just an sort of anti-air defender, if you're talking about this in a military sense, it's like an air-to-air fighter, right? It's not an air-to-ground fighter. I don't need him to carry bombs. Just go knock out the other fighters. And if the other fighters are wide receivers and you want them to be kept from catching balls down the field, like C.J. Henderson is a very good weapon to have. It's just that his game is not particularly well-rounded. If you ask him to do any of those other things, he's really not going to do it. I saw people that said those concerns were overblown, and my answer to that is we'll see right? Because you are
Yeah.
only as strong as your weakest link out towards the edge, and he was an abominably bad tackler. He was super, super bad. So, again, don't try and pass against him because he will burn you. He's got good size, got good quickness. He understands how to use his body to get in between the receiver and the ball. He's good at all that, like very good at all that, which is why he got drafted where he did. Higher than I would have drafted him for sure, but I value corners that can tackle. I am really interested in his fit with the head coach. Marrone is famously hard-nosed, and Henderson shied away from a lot of contact on the edge, and I am just like, you said popcorn earlier, I am popcorn fascinated to see how the Henderson-Marrone marriage goes, right? Because the first time that Henderson does an Olay on the corner and the guy picks up like an extra 7 yards, I can't imagine he's not going to get an earful on national TV. And if there's no fans in the stands, we're going to hear all that, which will be fascinating. But look, as a player, he's very, very skilled in coverage down the boundary. He has excellent size and length. He's as talented as anyone on the current roster, and he should start right away at corner. They have a need at corner. So again, we talk about path of playing time. Henderson's path is really good. I can't wait to see that first crack toss and see how it goes.
I kind of lump Kayvon Chason and Laviska Shenault into the same category, even though they're very different players, obviously different positions, different sides of the ball. And Kayvon Chason, I actually like a lot. He kind of reminds me of like a juiced up Kyle Van Noy, and I mean that in the most complimentary possible way. He does a lot of things really well. I think as a pass rusher, he's a little bit one-dimensional, but I think he's a good run defender. I think you can play him in coverage. He's excellent on special teams, team captain, leader, hard worker, all that kind of stuff. Like, he is Bill Belichick's wet dream in terms of, like, second-level players. I just don't know how they're going to play him in Jacksonville. Like, if they're going to be using him as a full-time edge, I don't think I would do that. Because, again, I think he doesn't really have any power as a pass rusher at all. I think he's all speed, all bend. And we've seen some other guys with similar pass rush skill sets, like Barkevious Mingo, Vic Beasley, where like if you don't have length and power to complement speed, you're not going to get much done. So I hope they're not just playing him purely at defensive end and saying, go get the quarterback, because unless your name is Yannick Ngakoue, ironically enough, it's hard, very hard to be consistently productive with that narrow of a skill set. Like Yannick is so far the exception, not the rule. He's a very unique player.
You want to know what's funny?
What?
They don't know either.
What do you mean? They don't know where they're going to play him?
Chason is the only player listed on the Jaguars website right now without a position next to his name.
Really?
Yes. I looked it up.
Huh.
When I did my research for this, and it may have changed in the last 2 or 3 days, but Kayvon Chason was the only player on the Jags roster with the sort of null square next to his name that just, it doesn't have anything. It's just blank. So we talked about this pre-draft, that Chason's fit was really dependent on where you're going to play him. Like, is he that kind of extra capable strong side? Like SLB linebacker? Like, we both kind of liked his fit there? Or is he more the sort of 4-3 straight wide 9 edge? Like, I don't know that I love that as much, because we both had the same sort of reservations about his limitations. Anyways, they haven't decided yet either. So we'll see how that all shakes out, and how fast he plays, how much his again, path to playing time. I know I keep saying it. Try not to get bored with it. It's actually really important in terms of landing spot. Depends a lot on Ngakoue and whether or not he stays or goes, because he could still go. Ngakoue's leverage is going to be really tough now that the draft is over, but it doesn't mean that he won't leave. But, you know, if he does, Chason gives the team another legit talent, in addition to Dwayne Smoot, who played really well for them last year, to pair with Josh Allen, who had a good, strong rookie season as a rusher for them. If Ngakoue finally sort of successfully blasts / argues with the owner his way out of town, which he's been trying to do. So it gives them another talent, but the question is, how are they going to use him?
Yeah, I really hope they keep him at strong backer.
I think it'll be better for him. You and I both agree on that. But I'm just not sure that they will. And that's kind of a theme with us in Jacksonville. We're not sure about the second pick out of round 1, Chason, the guy we're going to talk about next, Laviska Shenault, and the guy they picked in round 4, Ben Bartch, who's a developmental tackle. We're not in love with Jacksonville's staff developing talent at those positions. We're not sure. We don't have a ton of confidence that they're going to manage to take those folks without really defined roles and make them really good quickly. There are other staffs, and you hear us talk about them, we're like, oh no, this is the place. He went to the right place. If there was a good place for him in the NFL, this is it. I don't feel that way about a lot of these guys that went to Jacksonville with a less defined role. I'm more, let's just say, ambiguous about that.
Yeah, because Laviska, again, similar to Kayvon, where it's like, okay, I can see what he does well. I can see what he doesn't do well. I would want him, anybody would look great with Andy Reid, but I would want him to be with an Andy Reid type system where it's like, hey, we have a very creative screen game. We run tap passes. We'll give our wide receivers sweeps. We'll do all this kind of crazy inventive stuff where even if you're not a super refined receiver, we have ways to scheme you open. We have ways to manufacture touches so you can use your natural gifts, because Shenault is exceptional after the catch. He's a great athlete. He played Wildcat quarterback. He's an absolute freak of nature. And I think there are certain offenses where even as a rookie, even if he's not fully developed as a receiver, he could still be highly productive, almost like a Cordarrelle Patterson type, but maybe better. Because Patterson, I think, really his main value is as a returner, and even less so as a gadget player. I think Shenault can both be a returner and a gadget player, at least initially. And there's certain coaches that I think can really take advantage of that. I don't necessarily think Jay Gruden's one of them. So I don't know.
Yeah, I was shaky on Shenault, certainly a lot more so than a lot of my draft colleagues throughout the entire process. I think he's one of the dedicated scorers, not shooters, to go back to DJ and Bucky's analysis from Move the Sticks of this wide receiver class. He's a physical, fast guy who's not great down the field in sort of go up and get it sense, but that's okay in Jacksonville because they have Chark and Conley for that. They already have those guys. So if we talk about building a stable, this pick sort of fits. He's explosive and powerful. He can turn small gaps into big gains. And strangely enough, that meshes pretty well with their starting quarterback. Minshew's skills as a quarterback, if you're going to kind of put him in a box, are quick and accurate balls to the slot on time. He can do more than that, but that's where he's really good. The quick read to the slot, accurate and on time. And if he gives those balls to Shenault and Shenault catches them, that's where he can turn a 5-yard gap into a 70-yard gain. So it's not a terrible landing spot for him. But the good news is he doesn't have the pressure to be number one right away. And a lot of predicted draft landing spots for him had him sort of ascending to that role fairly quickly. And I was really nervous about that for him because I truly don't think that's who he is as a player. But he adds a needed dimension, mates pretty well with the QB skills. The question is, how often will they do it? How often will they give him chances in that sort of non-traditional receiver game or less traditional receiver game to really exploit and sort of showcase those skills? If they do, it could work really well. And maybe they start doing that early in the season and they get kind of addicted to it because they have a lot of success with it. And it just kind of snowballs. That's the best case scenario for Laviska Shenault. If they don't, and they want to run standard Poco, post corner, sluggo, deep in, really traditional kind of route tree wide receiver routes, I don't think Shenault's going to put up a lot of production really quickly.
Yeah, I hope for the best.
Hope for the best and prepare for the worst. You know how it works, Brett.
I'm a Texans fan, but I do want these guys to be successful. I just wish he went somewhere else. But
yeah.
Devon Hamilton, I like that fit.
I love the addition of Devon Hamilton to this D-line. He's one of my favorites pre-draft. He's underrated. He's really productive from multiple spots, which is great for this particular defensive line. Great athletic profile, especially for a guy that plays inside, can produce and pursue to the outside, which is We talked about guys like Raekwon Davis, not as likely to pursue to the outside. Devon Hamilton, again, productive in either spot. He's going to be well used. He's going to play a lot of snaps pretty quickly, I think, and he adds some more gas to the interior with Taven Bryan. Taven Bryan, the speed rusher added from Florida last year. That gives the Jags a little more juice inside. But again, he can kick out to a 5-tech and be just as productive and get pressure against the quarterback. Somebody commented on one of our videos on YouTube that pressure is better than sacks, right? Pressure is greater than sacks. And I was like, well, yeah, it is. And Devon Hamilton is one of those guys that can create a bunch of pressures. He might not create a bunch of sacks, but I thought it was a really good get. I was waiting. One of the guys in the draft, I was waiting to see where he ended up. And while it's not necessarily the best fit, it's a pretty good one, and his path to the field is really good. So, love Devon Hamilton.
Yeah, and we keep saying it over and over again. Path to the field. He's already better than Taven Bryan. I think Aubrey Jones is probably a better fit at nose, but I think he can probably play over Bryan immediately. He could probably play over Rodney Gunter immediately. So I think it's going to be either him or Al Woods starting, and I think just considering his potential, like I would probably put him day one as a starter interior. Which again, for a 3rd-round pick, if you're getting a day one starter, sign me up for that.
And if you rotate him with Bryan, because they're not the same players. Bryan is more of a pure penetrator. That was really his claim to fame coming out in the draft, was just a ton of twitch for a guy that was playing 3-tech. So if you rotate those two guys, Hamilton a little bit more well-rounded, Bryan a little bit more, we talked about Darrington Evans being a slasher as a running back, like Taven Bryan is a slasher as a defensive lineman. It can be very difficult for offenses to kind of keep up with that. Okay, which guy's in? What's he going to do? Okay, this guy does that. This guy does that. It's a multiple look, and that's good for a defense.
Yeah, I mean, you can never really have enough of those kind of guys, and I do agree. Bryan is more physically talented. I think has more potential as a pass rusher, but in terms of like, hey, it's 3rd and 3, and we need to have a guy that can actually like 2-gap and get off a block and make a tackle without getting driven 4 yards backwards. Like, yeah, to me that's going to be Devon Hamilton. So I like that pick a lot in the 3rd round. Probably one of my favorite picks they made. Period.
Yep.
If we're being honest. Ben Barch was a big favorite of mine. Saw him down at the Senior Bowl. He had a hell of a week. I think. Really, he only struggled when they asked him to switch to right tackle, which he was not used to. And it literally his first snap of the week at right tackle was going against Terrell Lewis, which is not fair. Not fair at all. So you kind of got ate up on that rep. But when he was at left tackle, he was, I don't think I saw him give up more than maybe 2 pressures the whole week against that slate of edge rushers he was going against. And that might be at most. So he's a really, really good left tackle. And 4th round was actually lower than I thought he'd go. I thought he had a decent chance of going in round 3, which coming out of St. John's, D3, I believe that is, like that would have been tremendous for him. But he's, again, really good feet, solid hand placement. He clearly the best player on the field anytime he took the field at St. John's, which you kind of expect from an NFL player. But I think he's got a real chance to be a swing tackle for them, like out the gate. I think they're set at their starting tackles, but you're kind of only as good as your worst link in the chain, or whatever the phrase is. I butchered that. But I think if one of their tackles goes down between Robinson and then Taylor, who they drafted last year, who I was a huge fan of, Juwan Taylor. If either one of them goes down, I think Barch can fill in and not really lose that much ground from their starting tackles. So again, for a 4th-round pick, that's a pretty damn good value to me.
Yeah, I like Barch. I think everybody else was a lot higher on him. He's a great story for sure, coming out of St. John's. And I thought he did extremely well for a guy out of St. John's. That's not saying I thought he did extremely well. I thought he got beat more than most people did. But I just kept running into people in Mobile who were singing his praises. And a lot of them are smarter than me. So I might be wrong about him. But I think, like you do, it's kind of 2 different ways around to get to the same conclusion. I think he's automatically their top backup at tackle. And honestly, that puts him 1 snap away from regular time. And again, we've talked about it on this podcast before. If you're a good swing tackle, you're not a good swing tackle for long. You're a starting tackle in this league because there is a dearth of tackle talent. And Barch is one of those guys that is going to be one snap away. And if he gets a few games on tape as a starting tackle, I think people will be pretty surprised with what he can do. I think he needs a year to develop physically. I really do. But other people are more convinced he can play right off the gun. Either way, it's a great value pick for him. And he went about where I thought he would. Again, you said he went a little behind where you thought he would. I thought he was right about. I thought it was good, solid value. I definitely didn't look sideways at the pick at all and thought, hey, they got him there. That's in my mind really, really solid for them.
I think their other fourth-round pick that they got from the 49ers, well, actually changed hand a couple times, but they eventually got it from the 49ers. They took Josiah Scott, corner from Michigan, which to me, anytime I did mock drafts, like he was one of those corners that I always had in my back pocket on like day 3 because he was always there. And I would always kind of like lean on him of being like, okay, well, I can't get anybody else, but I did get Josiah Scott. You know, if I didn't get any of the day 2 corners, I wanted.
We do have guys like that in the mock draft season, don't we?
Yeah, he ended up on like 20% of all my mock drafts as like my in the back pocket day 3 corner. So I liked him a lot. Again, he's a Michigan State DB, and you can't play DB at Michigan State without being tough and without being smart. Even if he's not as physically gifted as some of the other Spartan DBs that have come out in the last 5-6 years, I think, again, for a probably 4th corner on the roster, or at least on most rosters, you know, you're looking for a guy who tackles, who can play inside or out, who can play special teams, and you hope that he can eventually be like a starting caliber player. But for a 4th-round pick, like really you're taking a guy where he's going to mostly see time in dime and on special teams. And do I ever expect him to be a star? No. But I do think he can be a solid number 2 or number 3 for you, which is that's kind of all I'm really asking for from a guy like that.
Yeah, he's an extremely physical, small zone corner who's a very good tackler, and I think there's always a place for those guys. I talked about how I value tackling from corners. He's got good instincts in space. That's what makes him a great zone player. Decent anticipation or break on the ball, so he's going to make plays when he's out there. And coming up off the edge to snuff out screens or swings, he's really good at that, again, because of his physical nature. He had some injury concerns, missed about the first 8 games with a torn meniscus. He doesn't have great speed. He's got good short area quickness, but he does not have great speed. The weird thing about him is he's a body catcher, but I wrote in my notes, but a good one? Like, he made some crazy catches, and he does not hands catch the football. He absolutely cradles it with his forearms, but he made this one interception leaning out of bounds where he cradled it against his chest, but he like double toe tapped with his entire body extended out over the sideline. And it wasn't the only one I saw where he made a good catch, but it was a body catch. It's just weird. Usually we say body catcher is a bad thing, but he's a body catcher, but a good one. Just an odd note about him.
Yeah, well, he's a DB, so you don't really pay him to make it look pretty as long as he gets the pick. Just saying. Mm-hmm. But I am curious to see, because you take C.J. Henderson, who's an excellent man corner, who can play zone, but really I think he's best values in man. And you take Josiah Scott, who I think is really a better zone corner.
Yep.
And I don't really think is gifted enough to play man, like consistently. Like he can do it.
You don't want him playing a lot of man because of that lack of long speed. Like if he bites on the move, it's going to be like 7 yards of separation. It's not going to be close.
He's not somebody that you're leaving on an island with Will Fuller and saying, okay, go cover him. Like that's not going to happen.
Not if you're smart.
So, like, again, that's why he went in the 4th round. Like, you're taking him because he's tough, smart, plays good in zone, special teamer, like, all that kind of stuff. Like, you're not taking him because he's great in man coverage. But because they took Henderson and then they took Scott, like, I'm not really sure what they're going to do.
Yeah, what are they going to do with those guys? I had the same question writing up my notes. I was like, who are they going to be on defense? Because we know who they were. We know that Jalen Ramsey kind of famously shot his way out of town because he couldn't play as much man as he wanted to. So are they switching to zone and Henderson's going to fit in that system? Or are they going to kind of mix an even amount of man in zone, which they didn't really do. They definitely leaned more towards zone. It's just it's a fascinating use case scenario of, so where are they going? And if you look at the sort of tea leaves in the draft, it looks like they're going to play more zone than man.
Yeah, again, it's another one of those picks where it's like, I like the player, but I don't know what they're gonna do with him. Like, this whole Jags draft is just like confusing.
Let's wait and see.
Yeah, it's very confusing to me. Like Shaq Quarterman, like in a vacuum, yeah, he's a plugger in the middle. He's your prototypical Mike linebacker. You want him playing inside the hashes and just destroying the run game. Not so much, making waves in coverage. Like, he's not going to be somebody that I'm going to put on like Christian McCaffrey and man, or Alvin Kamara and man. Like, he's not that kind of guy.
No.
But at the same time, they already have Miles Jack, Joe Schobert, and potentially Kayvon Chase on at linebacker. So, and they also just took Quincy Williams last year. So what are they doing with him?
If you go through the roster, that's the thing that struck me with Quarterman as I was, again, sort of figuring out, okay, who does he have to beat? Where does he fit? Is he backing somebody up? Is he replacing somebody that's going to be off contract next year? All those sort of roster building concerns. And Quarterman is that classic hitter between the hashes. He reminded me of a slightly less capable Denzel Perryman when I watched him, and I wasn't super high on Denzel Perryman. He's played pretty well in San Diego. But Quarterman...
San Diego?
L.A. I mean, he did play in San Diego. It's true.
Technically correct. The best kind of correct.
Yes. You're right, though. L.A. So I was okay on his skills, but the thing that struck me about going through the Jags roster that again says, okay, what are they going to do with him, is they have a lot of these ILB types on their roster. Quarterman makes 6 guys. None of them are like tremendous. Like, yeah, Miles Jack is there, and for sure that's great. But the bottom 4 are guys that you probably haven't heard of, but that's where they're going to play if they're going to play. And so what are you doing going and getting another one? Right? You're never going to play more than 2 of those guys on pretty much any defense you run. And more than likely, you're going to play 1 or, quite frankly, in a heavy passing league, 0 of those guys on a lot of plays. So what are you doing with 6 of them on your roster? Like, at what point? Like, what coach has sway that you're ending up with a bunch of guys that are really good between the hashes as good, solid tacklers? Because there's just not a tremendous need for those guys in the NFL. Now, maybe they're looking at Tennessee and saying, hey, we got to have a bunch of pluggers that can stand in there and make tackles against Tennessee's run game. Possibly, but 6 of them? Like, 4 is 2 with 2 good backups. So maybe they think, Quarterman is better than 3 of those other guys, maybe, and he's one of their top backups. I don't know.
Maybe
it's just a fascinating thing.
Jason's going to be an edge, and that they're...
It could be. Again, they haven't figured that out either. So, back to a guy that we actually liked a little bit more, Daniel Thomas. I really liked the way that he moved in combine drills. I had seen him sort of tangentially because I was watching Cam Dantzler and Igbenogany and Javaris Davis and Dinson, and I saw Thomas by association, which is pretty crazy that basically the entire Auburn secondary ended up in the NFL. And it's pretty crazy that nobody brings up Auburn in the sort of who's the DBU discussions, but literally they just put 5 guys from one class in the NFL. Their entire secondary is now in the NFL. But I like the way he moved at the combine. So I went back and looked at him and I thought, this is a guy that you can take later round, which is exactly what they did. That gives you some of that flexibility of, hey, you can bring him down. You can play a little bit of slot. He can play a little bit of sort of heavy or strong safety. His coverage is pretty good. He's fluid. Not a bad guy to have in your secondary. A sort of Swiss Army knife that can play a little bit of everything. We talked about positionless defense. I thought Dinson had some of that potential. And certainly, moves well enough to play special teams. If he played at Auburn, he's physical. Auburn doesn't do not physical. So not a bad get. What'd you think about Daniel Thomas?
Yeah. He kind of reminded me of, in terms of like other guys in this class that are similar, like a diet version of Kayvon Wallace from Clemson. It's very good movement skills.
And a light version,
not
sure.
super big, but great hips, great feet. Not great long speed, but like short area explosiveness. I think he can play either deep or he can play in the nickel. Again, I really like his movement skills other than long speed. just really, really intriguing, versatile kind of, not even safety, not even corner, just straight up DB.
Yeah, DB, that DB designation you see on teams' websites, like he earns that one.
Yeah, and so I am very curious to see if he is a corner, if he is a safety, because he can do both. The only thing that I don't think he can do is be like a pure center fielder.
Yeah, free safety.
I don't think he has the range for that. But everything else, even though he's not super big, I even think he's a good enough guy to be a strong safety where, he's your force player against the run, protecting CJ Henderson from himself, I think he can even do that. So
okay, that got me. That was good. That was good.
So I'm not quite sure where they're going to put him, but I know he's a good player.
I think we should just have T-shirts for the Jacksonville. It should just say Jacksonville Draft 2020. I'm not really sure where they're going to put him. Oh, anyways, one guy I'm really sure we know where they're going to put him. Colin Johnson, solidly in round 5 is a great get. He's a huge target. Colin Johnson, wide receiver out of Texas. He's 6'5". He's a decent, if unconventional, route runner. He's got some stuff we'll talk about with his route running. He's got good moves and feet for a guy 6'5". He's going to need to expand his route tree a little bit, and he's going to have to work on his releases. Rookie receivers, it's always about releases, and his releases are not great. He needs to get faster with his releases. But right away, he's going to contribute along the sideline and in the red zone. He's a good, very good 50-50 ball, back shoulder, contested catch receiver. You throw that ball to him, he catches it more often than not. He wins those balls much more than 50% of the time. Literally, if you draw a box 5 yards wide that is bordered on one side by the sideline and extend it from wherever the line of scrimmage is to the end zone, that's Colin Johnson territory. You can throw him the ball in that box and he's going to win a lot. So they're going to start this guy. Well, not start this guy necessarily, but they're going to play this guy outside. And in the red zone, he can and does work the middle of the end zone in the red zone. But generally between the 20s, this guy is in that box 5 yards from the sideline and down as deep as you want to toss it to him. I think he's a great, great grab in round 5.
Yeah, he kind of fills an interesting role that I just don't think they had filled before that. I think they had some really good deep threats on the team. DJ Chark, great deep threat. TD Westbrook, he can work you deep, or you can kind of be a yak guy for you. But I don't think they really had that kind of big, dominant physical boundary receiver where it's hey, I'm going to throw a back shoulder fade and they know it's coming. Go win anyway. They didn't really have somebody that could do that before Colin Johnson, at least not as well as Colin Johnson. Does he go deep as well and track the ball deep as well as Chark? No. Is he as good of a route runner as really anybody else on the roster? No. Is he as tough over the middle as Keelan Cole or have as good as hands as Keelan Cole? No. But I think just in that, as you said, in that one role of hey, we're inside the 25-yard line. They know what play is coming. We still need you to go win and execute it. Yeah, he's going to be that kind of guy for them. And I don't think he's going to make very many catches inside the numbers, period. But I think having that kind of presence, for a young quarterback like Gardner Minshew, where reliably you can win on contested catches, where, they're dropping a guy in the box, it's single high coverage, you have man-to-man outside, the world's your oyster, you can put it anywhere you want to, and you're literally just reading the leverage of Johnson, go make a play. Those kinds of throws were desperately lacking in Jacksonville's offense last year. So, again, really good fit for what they need out of a receiving core that I think is better than people think and more well-rounded than people think, now more than ever. But that was one of the picks that I really, really like for them, mainly just because it's a role that we can actually project. Like you said, we know what he's going to be doing.
We got this one right. No, if you look at what they've done in terms of what they had and what they've added, again, back to that stable concept, you got Chark, Conley, Westbrook, Chenault, and Johnson. If you line up in 5 wide with Minshew pulling the trigger in his classic sort of, where he's comfortable, right? That air raid, get the snap, pick it, and chuck it, that's a lot of options that could produce some pretty good results.
And a lot of different skill sets.
Yep. Very varied, right? You've rounded out the stable.
None of them are like each other.
No, the closest two are Chark and Conley, but Chark's better than Conley. So, and Westbrook, like you said, he can go deep, but it's typically deep over the middle. He's not necessarily, he can double move the boundary, but again, it's that short middle zone to, okay, if I'm going to go, down and run middle post, like that's a Westbrook route that I see him run pretty effectively. And again, that's not going to get in Colin Johnson's way because Colin Johnson's going to be over by the boundary. So it is an interesting kind of layering concept to a receiving core that I think looks a lot better after the draft, even though it wasn't bad before, but they've added things they didn't have.
Yeah. I don't have much of an opinion on any of their last three picks between Luton. Tyler Davis I did not watch, and Chris Claybrooks, the corner from Memphis, I did not watch either.
Yeah.
So the floor is yours for any of those guys.
Luton's the only guy I watched. Again, Luton became a darling out of Oregon State as kind of a late-round developmental quarterback. I can see him becoming a long-term NFL clipboard holder, and I don't say that in a bad way. The NFL is short on quarterback talent, kind of like it's short on offensive tackle talent, and quite frankly, if he grasps the playbook pretty quickly, puts up some good exhibition footage, I can see him sticking around for 5 to 8 years, probably with a variety of teams, not with the same team necessarily. He throws a very pretty classic ball, over-the-top delivery from a tall guy with a solid base. He's got pretty decent accuracy. One of his receivers got drafted. We've already covered him in one of our podcasts. So it's just, he's a sort of classic. I look like a quarterback. I play pretty much like the quarterback you expect. I'm going to stand in the pocket a lot. Don't have a ton of mobility, but I'm a big, tall drop back passer with a good over the top delivery and decent accuracy. Those guys, they stay employed for a while, but it's time. We need to talk about Houston. I feel like the dad here. I'm like, Brett, we need to talk. It's about Houston.
Why are you trading?
No, don't
DeAndre
start
Hopkins?
there. Don't start there. Let's just focus on the draft. I know we could bring up,
but that's
old
part.
wounds.
That's part of it. That's
of course it's part of it.
We didn't have a first round pick because they traded it for a second, and then used their other second round pick to get Brandon Cooks.
Yes.
Like that's part of our draft is a second round pick on Brandon Cooks, who over the last 3 years averages less than 60 yards a game.
I know.
That's what we spent our second round pick on.
It's not really like getting Stephon Diggs for a first, is it?
Or Denzel Mims for a second.
Oh, well, yeah, if you want to go there. Anyways, let's talk about the guys they did pick, because we could talk about Bill O'Brien's GMing, and I put that in air quotes, GMing, or lack thereof, for a long time, and that could be its very own and interesting podcast, and I'm sure there'll be some requests for that on YouTube and in our Apple podcast
People
comments.
just want to see me drink myself to death.
They do. I don't. So let's talk about something you're happy about. Round 2, pick 40, Ross Blacklock. And yes, we're calling him Ross, not Justin, this time. And he deserves it. The DT out of TCU. Player that I got more excited about in the process, but go ahead and take the floor on Ross and let me know what you think of not only the player, but also his fit with Houston.
Yeah, he is the best part of our offseason. Of every move the Texans have made in free agency or in the draft, Ross Blacklock was the best move they made.
I don't disagree with that. I hadn't thought of it that way, but I think you're right.
Yeah. I mean, we had a huge need at interior defensive lineman because we lost DJ Reader tragically to the Bengals.
Tragically.
Well, tragically for us,
I know.
great for DJ.
I know. It's just funny.
God. Don't even get me started. So, I mean, we were staring down the barrel of having next to J.J. Watt, Eddie Vanderdoes, and Angelo Blackson.
Vanderdoes I kind of like. Blackson, I'm sorry about that.
And Charles Omenihu, really good as a rookie. He has a role there. He was kind of like the replacement for Jadeveon Clowney in the sense that they would move Clowney all over the place, play some 5, play some 3, play some linebacker. Like Omenihu was literally all over the line. But he's not really like a dedicated nose. He's not a dedicated 3. they needed somebody to fill that role, especially because Reader was gone. And Reader's one of the best defensive tackles, period, in the NFL. Blacklock, I think, is a phenomenal talent. Much smaller than DJ was. He's about 290. DJ was 315, 320, somewhere around there. So different kind of player. But Ross, he punches so much above his weight class. Really, really strong, exceptionally quick. That pair of DTs that came out of Florida State a while back, it was Eddie Goldman and Timmy Jernigan.
Yeah, I've heard of Eddie Goldman, strangely.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. He kind of reminds me of like a mix between them, but twitchier and more fluid. But in terms of like, hey, he can play a little bit of cock nose for you and just anchor down. He can two gap for you. He can penetrate. Like he's kind of the best of both of those guys, but in an even more athletic package.
Yeah.
And I know that doesn't sound...
No, it does. I get it because of my opinion of Blacklock. Like, I think he's a stud. Like, when I watched him the first time, I watched him back-to-back with Justin Madubuike from Texas A&M. And I thought, these guys are kind of similar. And then I watched them both again, and my second watching of him pre-draft really solidified my opinion of Blacklock as a two-way wrecker on defense. Like, he's physical. He's very strong. Like you said, punches above his weight. He's not a particularly weighty guy, but he's a very strong guy. He's physical, he's fast, he's aggressive. He plays with power against the run. We talked about setting a hard edge. He absolutely can do that. But if you give him a gap, he can close against the pass better than a lot of his draft mates from this class that share his position. Really like his game. And, we were both on the pre-draft live stream that we did for Bootleg, waiting, sometimes maybe with bated breath, for the first pick that Houston was going to make. And they made the pick of Blacklock, and I was like, wow, I don't hate it. That's really actually pretty good. It's a good need. It's a good value. That's a good player. Like, hey, you don't get to be disappointed about this one. I was almost sad for you because I knew you were sort of prepping to be absolutely devastated by it.
And, and we didn't take Mims, who was really who I wanted the most. But if there was one player that isn't named Denzel Mims that I would be okay with at pick 40, guess what? It's Ross Blacklock.
He's a very good get. He balances out that interior offensive line. Certainly gives you more talent than just about anybody else that's sitting there. And I think he's going to be a really, really solid player for the Texans. And at pick 40, that's a great get. Now, next round 3, pick 90, Jonathan Grenard. They list him as a linebacker out of Florida, but he truly played edge there, or really DE for Florida. What are your thoughts on Grenard?
So there is nobody last year in college football that was better at getting to the quarterback when nobody blocked him than Jonathan Grenard.
Oh my God, that is the biggest backhanded compliment, double-handed backhanded slap I've heard.
I think he's a freaking ninja because nobody knew he was there. They just let him go.
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of plays dotting his tape where and this is the thing in pre-draft work. I had people send me those plays and say, look at this. And I'm like, nobody blocked him. Like, you could run to the quarterback in that case. Like, nobody touched him. They devoted no one. No chip block, no tight end, no running back. Like, literally, I'm with you. They just forgot he was there, and he goes and obliterates the poor quarterback. And I'm like, okay, like, I'm not going to hold it against Grenard, but at the same time, I'm not really giving him credit for it either because he literally made no moves, got up off the snap, and hustled and hit a guy. Like, that's a bag drill.
Yeah. I mean, he's a good run defender, and he plays with good effort, but every time, like, every single draft class has that guy who's, like, the king of the unblocked highlight that everybody gets super hyped about.
Yeah.
And they burn us every year.
Yeah.
Every year. So, like, it's a third-round pick.
Yeah. He was my less favorite of the two Florida rushers. I like Jabari Zuniga a bit better. He was less flashy, but I thought more functional.
Yeah.
Grenard's first step is decent, but it's not great. He's okay in coverage, but he really is a going forward guy, not a guy you want dropping back. He did drop back a little bit at Florida, but it wasn't terrible pretty. When he wins, and make a note of this, Texan fans, it is with one move. When it is against not air, when he is playing against another player that is, dutifully committed to keeping him from getting to the quarterback, he will win with one move. And this move came up like 8 times in 2 games that I did of Jonathan Grenard. And it is the double hand swipe. Mm-hmm. Sometimes he combos it with a dip, but this is his signature jam. The ham swipe is Grenard's moneymaker. He has a decent inside counter. He has average ball awareness against the run, but when you see him win to the outside on a pass rush, I almost guarantee a hand swipe will be involved. It is his go-to, and it is the one that gets him around the edge. Now, it is a bit of a hand swipe, and sometimes he'll get that interior shoulder dip to make it a little bit more effective, but it's literally just take both hands and slap away both offensive tackle hands and then see if you can get your body around. And when he wins a pass rush, Texans, I bet there'll be a hand swipe involved.
You know who went 57 picks after Jonathan Grenard? And this is going to break your heart. Not as much as it broke mine.
Is it Khalid Kareem?
Yep.
Yeah, Khalid Kareem I would take in a heartbeat over Grenard. I actually think Jabari Zuniga and Khalid Kareem are a bit closer, but I would take Khalid Kareem as, again, a sort of... Can you imagine Kareem and Blacklock on the same line? They have a lot...
You're killing me.
Yeah, they have a lot of the same strengths, and if you put them on the same side, they're going to be a problem. Like, those guys might not make the play, but they're going to crack open so many openings that somebody else on the defense is going to make the play, because they can really cause some havoc, both of them. So, yeah.
They would have given Amenahu 5 sacks just from that.
Yeah, no, Amenahu would be dealing with Grenard coverage, which is, hey, there's nobody here. I can hit the quarterback. So moving on to Charlie Heck, the OT from North Carolina, who we got to see. He was a late ad at the Senior Bowl, so he showed up a day late. He is the son of Andy Heck, the Seahawk and the Bear offensive lineman, long time. And Heck is a massive human being. He is 6'8", 315, completely rocked. Got to see him in weigh-ins and thought, man, there's not an ounce of fat on that guy. He is amazingly in shape. And look, his dad was a pro for many years. I think he's got the ability, again, to be a very solid swing tackle. On the first day of Senior Bowl practices, after flying in late, he got himself handed lunch several times by defenders. I was most interested to see what happened on the day after that, when he got a chance to go back to the hotel room, maybe watch the tape, do some interviews with teams, kind of maybe call his dad and say, hey, this happened today. What do I do? Maybe called his position coach. I don't know.
His dad is the Chiefs' offensive line coach, by the way. Yeah. Like, that's what Andy's doing now.
Right. So, he's got a really good source there for multiple reasons. And I really wanted to see, hey, does he just continue to kind of look outclassed, or does he kind of solid up, not really get his name called for any bad reasons on the next day? And that's exactly what happened for the next 2 days, is he righted the ship. He looked a lot more steady. And I thought, that's a guy you can plug in for a long time at swing tackle. He's got the tools. He's certainly athletic. He's got the frame for it, for sure. And if he's one of those guys that makes a mistake once and doesn't make it again, that is the sort of a prototypical swing tackle in the NFL. And I like the fact that they got Heck in the 4th.
Yeah, you really hope that he can turn into like a Gosder Chairless, where not super great get off, not super great bend, but he's so long that if he can just learn how to use his hands and place his hands correctly, using independent hand pass pro, not just lunging with a double punch, but like actually being able to, punch right, punch left, punch right, punch left, actually control a guy.
Yeah.
If you learn how to use your hands when you have that kind of size and length, you don't need to be able to do a whole lot else.
Yeah.
And that's what Gosder Chairless did, not super quick, not super bendy, but really long, really strong, really good hand placement. And he didn't give up a whole lot of sacks, during his heyday. And I think he can be that kind of guy. And as we've said many times before, there's not a whole lot of good swing tackles in the NFL because most of the good ones end up starting somewhere. So I don't expect Heck to start in front of obviously Laramie Tunsil and in front of Taylor, who they just took in the first round last year, who had a pretty good rookie campaign before injuries, or not Taylor, Titus Howard. I was thinking of the Jags guy who I initially wanted, but then we took Titus Howard. But anyway, Howard had a pretty good rookie year before, injuries kind of racked up for him. But I think Heck, tools-wise, is better than Roderick Johnson and can potentially be their swing tackle as a rookie over Roderick Johnson. And the Texans have a horrible habit of getting injured at tackle. I mentioned Howard got banged up last year. Tunsil got banged up but played through it, but he was not healthy for a good chunk of the year. I think at one point, at least 4 of their 5 offensive linemen were hurt. So, Houston has a long and storied tradition of never being fully healthy on the offensive line, so you can really never have enough of them. And to get a guy as talented as Heck, again, not super explosive, not super bendy, but physically talented with length and strength, getting him to be a swing tackle of the future for the next at least 4 years, I think can be immensely valuable, and I'm sure Deshaun appreciates it.
Yeah, he better. I think he will. The next guy, also in round 4, 141, a guy I watched late in the process, John Reed, cornerback from Penn State. Now, we know Bill O'Brien's got Penn State connections. John Reed's a guy that got hurt and came back, much like Josiah Scott that we talked about, but completely different corner. More physically dominant, a little bit under 6 foot, rocked up, very solidly built, and uses it. He is a missile when he comes up. He likes to hit. He knows how to tackle, not just hit. He can wrap up. Very good break on the ball when he puts his foot in the ground. I like Reed. If Reed wasn't injured, I think he would have gone a lot higher.
Yeah, I think he's immediately probably the most natural fit at nickel on the whole team, because when you look at all the other corners they have, they're kind of stockpiling, weirdly enough, a lot of like boundary man corners. It's almost like the opposite problem of Chicago, where they have a million nickels but not a whole lot of boundary guys. Like, they were pretty thin going into the draft. It was Kyle, and then they took Jalen, and like that was like all they had. But where they had 5 nickels. Whereas Houston's kind of the opposite. They had Gary and Conley, boundary, press man corner. They had Bradley Roby, boundary corner there. They had Lonnie Johnson, again, boundary corner. Philip Gaines, boundary corner. Like, they didn't have any like pure nickels other than Vernon Hargraves, who isn't that good. So I think having John Reed, who has the quickness, certainly kind of prototypical nickel build. Oh, yeah. Not the biggest guy, but I mean, just
uses every ounce.
Yeah, but I mean, his feet are pistons. Like, they are just like he is so quick in the lower half. It's really just fun to watch, especially like
hyper aggressive.
Oh yeah. He's one of those guys where, again, I'm never playing him on the boundary because the long speed and the size, they don't really project to that. But if he's just playing inside, man, like he could be on this team for a long time, just because of how explosive he is, how I'll say eager to ruin people's
annihilate
day. He is
eager to annihilate. Yeah, that's another great T-shirt.
He'll play special teams.
No, for sure.
He's a tough, explosive kid.
I said that I was looking at his teammate earlier, Robert Windsor, and looking for sort of a late round steal. I came to Reed about the same time in the process, and I thought, okay, here's another Penn State guy. Everybody's saying he's really good. Blah blah blah. I was like, turn on the tape. I was like, oh, wait a minute. He is really good. Like, this guy's got it. So I was pretty excited to see him end up in Houston. And again, not that many people on the roster in front of him that have a clear talent gap. And look, nickel is the new base. Dime is played a lot more often than it used to be. I think he gets on the field early and often. The last guy, round 5, pick 171, Isaiah Coulter, wide receiver, Rhode Island. Did not watch him pre-draft. Went back for this podcast, watched him again. Coulter is a big guy, 6'3", 6'4", 6'3", I think. Has traits, but his releases and routes need work. He struggles to create separation, and rookie receivers who do that don't typically find the field very quickly. His blocking has a lot of effort, but it needs some technique help to catch up. Again, that's something that's coachable. Great leaping ability. Hands are okay. My notes also say, poor bastard, lined up farther away from his QB than he could actually throw it on at least half of his plays. The Rhode Island quarterback could not string a deep out for anything. Not if his life depended on it. So it's really tough to sort of grade Coulter's production based on the fact that the offense suited him, but the playmaker quarterback was not really capable of getting him the ball. He's raw right now. He's a rangy athlete playing wide receiver. He needs some focus. He might get that. I really think he's sort of destined for the practice squad, but quick note for everybody that stayed to the end of the podcast, little deep draft 2021 nugget. His teammate, Aaron Parker, the other wide receiver at Rhode Island, is going to get drafted higher than Coulter did. He is a guy that kept stealing reps as I was watching Coulter. I kept being like, is he number 6 or number 8? Like, who is that guy? And so I went and looked him up. Aaron Parker's a senior this year at Rhode Island. He is not quite as athletic, but he is as big. He's also 6'3", works the middle a whole lot better. His hands are a whole lot better. His routes are a whole lot better. So I think Aaron Parker is going to be the superior Rhode Island wide receiver. Never thought I'd utter that phrase on this podcast, but yeah, that pretty much wraps up the AFC South. That's a lot of guys. No surprise we went long again, Brett. It's weird.
Shocker. I know. I'm probably going to end up cutting this down in post because God forbid nobody wants to hear us talk for 2 hours about the AFC South. But they might do it if it's an hour and a half, so I'll probably cut this down a little bit.
There you go. Chop, chop.
Yeah, but man, it's rough year to be a Texans fan. All I can hope for is that Deshaun does Deshaun things and wills us to victory yet again, because that's kind of all we can really rely on. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in this team outside of Deshaun, JJ, and that's about it. But hey, whatever. We're Texans fans. We're not meant to be happy. It's not in the cards for us. But yeah, Colts fans, you should be excited. Tennessee fans, you should be excited. Jags fans, once we figure out exactly where all these guys are going to play, you may or may not be excited, but it's not a bad class, just a confusing one. But so overall, I think everybody in the South did well. Houston didn't have a whole lot of picks, but I think we did okay with them. But really, I think clearly the best classes were Indy and were Tennessee. And when you combine the fact that they also have pretty strong rosters as it is, and better coaching staffs and better front offices than Houston, yeah, things are looking kind of bleak for us in 2020. But any closing thoughts on the South for you?
I liked a lot of the players. We followed a lot of these players really closely. I liked the fits, especially Tennessee, in terms of just driving the draft to fit. It just sort of putting fit, I don't want to say above all else, but like right up there is sort of filter number one. Does this guy fit our system? And I know that sounds incredibly simplistic, but you'd be surprised. There's a lot of teams that for one reason or another don't do that. So really interested to see the battles. As always, we talked about some great corners. We talked about some great wide receivers. We talked about some decent offensive linemen, some decent defensive linemen. Seeing those guys go against each other twice a year is always going to be fascinating. But we will be back fairly soon. We are going to wrap up the other South, the NFC South, and then move out west. A lot of you have been requesting that we do either the AFC or the NFC West. Those will be our two closing categories for this 8-part series of all the division draft recaps. But yeah, that's what we've got going on for now.
Yep. So we'll be back in a few days with that. And yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you later.